21 and 24 are all the Ethos books. So I'm going to do the first 4, 13 to 16, which are the books where Odysseus finally returns to his home in Ithaca in disguise. So I start with this map first because I have to show you some things that happen. These books are the books where he tells a lot of lies. There are a series of 8 of them. And they really define the character, these lies. The way he uses them, the way he uses his mind, the way he reads people. They're very interesting to look at closely. And the first lie comes right at the beginning of book 13. And he always uses Crete. Oops. Oh, I have a thing. Let's see if that. Okay. Yep. All right, I got it. He always uses Crete as his home base. Crete is here. Ithaca is up here. So what he's doing, he's trying to use a place that he comes from that is so far away from his home that supposedly no one else will know, so they can't check on his lies. So that's why he's always from Crete, in here. Now, from Ithaca, Telemachus has gone to Sparta, first to Pylos. He stops there with his boat, and then he goes inland with a chariot to see Menelaus. Then he comes back here, and then he sails back home to meet his father, who has already arrived there. Troy is up here. So what Odysseus had to do was to come all around here. And when you come in this area here, it's very windy, even today, because the Aegean Sea here meets the Mediterranean. So there are a lot of winds. And this is where he's blown off course, and he goes down here, and then he goes over here to Italy before he comes back to Ithaca after 10 years wandering. So this is the map that shows his journey. In those days, the ships probably had to travel very close to land. They would go around like this before going to Troy. That way. They hardly ever went this way to go up that way. Although when they're coming back, a few of the soldiers here, especially Nestor, who lives down here, cuts across like this and has no trouble at all. Yes?
What kind of mileage are you talking about there, roughly?
All I know is that from my place right here to Athens is 290 miles.
Oh, okay.
That distance right there. This is one of the farthest islands from the mainland. This is Turkey now here, and there's their boundary. So you see how close these islands are to Turkey. This one is just 1 mile right here. 1 mile separates it from Turkey. Okay, that was just the, so you have an idea. So let's start with 13. Book 13, I divided into 2 parts. It's his departure from Ithaca. So we go back to the Phaeacians where he's telling these stories. He finishes telling them the story. They put him on a boat to go to Ithaca. 20% of the book. And then the rest of it, 80%, is the arrival when he comes to his island. Notice, as I have here the various episodes, notice always the parallelism of these books that I spoke of before. He starts in Syria. Oops. He starts there, then he comes to Ithaca, and then there's a discussion between Poseidon and Zeus, which is important, and then notice again back to Syria, Ithaca, Syria, Ithaca, Syria, Ithaca, Poseidon in the middle. The whole book is very balanced in this way. Even the individual episodes within each book is balanced. The numbers here represent the line numbers 1 to 95 is when he gets back, etc., etc. Okay, let me move on to the good parts. This is book 13 now, what happens in book 13. The first thing is that he comes into a harbor, which repeats the harbor that we had previously, where he has all his problems. Remember when he visited the Lastragonians, he came into a harbor, and that's where he lost 11 of his 12 ships, because his men were foolish enough to go into the calm area. This, on the other hand now, is a welcoming harbor, the same as the Lastragonians, but it's positive rather than negative. Everything now becomes positive. There's a cave there, which reminds us of the Cyclops cave, but this cave is the cave of the nymphs, a welcoming cave, where he hides his loot, all the gifts that he has received. There's an olive tree under which his gifts are placed, which reminds one of Athena, the goddess of wisdom. The olive tree is her tree. It was also the olive branch that put out the Cyclops eye. But all of those symbols now become positive in this particular case. And I have that thing in red just as an aside, because it's created a lot of problems with people reading translations. For example, if you're reading the Lattimore translation, which we are, let me get mine. When you're reading the Lattimore translation, he sees that particular line, and this shows you the problems with translation, actually. He sees that as, he translates it, but do not hide their city under a mountain. When Odysseus is brought back to Ithaca, Poseidon, the god of the sea, gets very upset that the man he is punishing is allowed to go free. And he wants to punish those that sent him there, the Phaeacians. So he says, he goes to Zeus and he says, I want to do something. I'm not being honored. You're taking away my power and the things I want to do. So I'm going to freeze this ship and make it into a stone, so that these people will know never to convey anyone else without my permission. And he says, besides that, I'm going to put a mountain around their city so no one can ever get out of it. And Zeus says, yes, you can freeze, you do whatever you like, but don't put a mountain around them. That's too much. And the phrase in Greek is mega despin oros poli amphikalypse. That means, but the way it's written right there, that's why I have it, you can also take it as put a mountain around their city. So the Fagles translation that some of you are reading says put a mountain across. Lattimore says do not put a mountain across, because you can translate it either way. So it depends who's translating, and that happens often in Greek. I mentioned to you before when the Cyclops says, who put your eye out? And he says, no man is putting my eye out. Metis, M-E-T-I-S. But what Odysseus really means is metis, as one word, which means intelligence is putting your eye out. But that's not how the Cyclops reads it. So there are many such phrases throughout. Another thing that happens in this book is, up to this point, the first 12 books, Poseidon is the major god. He's the one that's punishing Odysseus. He now disappears, and Athena takes over. She becomes the major god throughout here. And we reach the first lie, which is the thing that I want to emphasize here, because these lies become very important. And this first lie is only, I think, about 30 lines in length. So it's a good one to look at. because the others can be much longer, AD, 100 lines, etc. But this is a short one. So when Odysseus lands on Ithaca, he doesn't know where he is because Athena creates a mist around him. And he thinks again that he's in some strange land, which continues his adventures. He thinks that the Phaeacians have cheated him again, like everybody else, and they dumped him some unknown place, and he even thinks they might have taken some of his wealth with them. But they haven't. He was sleeping, they landed him, they put his wealth out under the tree, and they moved on. He doesn't know that. And then he meets this young shepherd that comes by, who is Athena in disguise. And now he's in a dilemma. He says, where am I? Who is this person, this shepherd? Could it be a monster, a god, whoever? And what's going to happen to my goods that are piled here next to me? And so he says this story, which in this book is on page 204, line 255 everywhere else. And he says the following, which I'm going to read here to show you. He says to the shepherd, he says to the shepherd, where am I? I want to know. And the shepherd starts to talk to him. And then he says, yeah, I heard of Ithaca when I was in wide Crete. Remember, all of a sudden now he's from Crete, as far away from Ithaca as he can get. And he says, I've come here with these goods that you see, but leaving as much again to my children. He's telling him, I'm a very wealthy man. You might see all of this wealth under the tree, but I have that much more that I left to my children. And then he says, I have fled an exile because I killed the son of Idomeneus. Idomeneus is the king of Crete. He was a major warrior in the Iliad, one of the leaders. So here he says, I killed the son of Idomeneus. Now, why did he kill the son of Idomeneus? Orsilochus was the name of the son. A man swift of foot. That means he can run a lot. Don't try to run away, because I caught and killed him. And no matter how fast you can run, I killed the man that ran fastest of anyone else. And I still got him. Who in wide Crete surpassed all other mortal men for speed of his feet. I killed him because he tried to deprive me of all my share of the plunder. Don't try and take away what I have under this tree, because I've already killed somebody for doing that. And then he goes on to say, I suffered pains, the worst of men, crossing the big waters, for I would not do his father the favor and serve as his henchman in the land of Troy. He says they wanted me to be his second in command, but I'm too good for that. I had my own command, which he goes on to tell us about. And he went to Troy. He's trying to show that he's a very important man that's capable of killing others for taking his plunder, etc. And then he says later on, but then when I had cut him down with a sharp bronze, I went at once to a ship and supplicated the lordly Phoenician men and gave them spoil to stay their eagerness, and asked them to carry me and set me down in Pylos. The Phoenicians always come into this lies because they were merchants, and merchants were considered also abductors of people. They sold people into slavery. That was one of the things they did. So Phoenicians in most cases are the bad guys where Odysseus is concerned. As a matter of fact, Odysseus was very upset in the Cyclops cave when the Cyclops asked him, are you a merchant? He takes that as a negative comment. So here he says the Phoenicians took him Usually they take slaves, but in this case, he paid them to drop him off at a particular point. But they were driven off course. We came in here by night and rode hastily in the harbor. And they took him out of the ship. They laid him down. Weary as I was, the sweetness of sleep came upon me, while they, taking all the possessions out of the hollow hull, set them ashore on the sand, and close to the place where I was lying. And they, embarking, went on their way to strongly settled Sidon. But I, grieving in the heart, was left behind. Here the Phoenicians took him off the ship, laid him down, didn't take any of his wealth, and they went away. So here they're good. Why are they good? Because it's a signal to the shepherd that don't try anything. Even the Phoenicians left me alone with my wealth. So everything he's saying, he's signaling the person that he's talking to, the kind of man he is, what he's capable of, who he is, without actually saying anything about himself to these people. And that's how he operates. He never comes out and says anything up front. He always allows his listener to make up their own mind of what he's saying. But he always feeds them the information that if they're intelligent people, they will realize what's going on. Just like when he met in book 6 that girl Nausicaa. He's not going to open up and say who he is, but the way his mannerisms, the way he talks to her, lets her know if she is intelligent, that he has good intentions, that he's a good person, and feeds her enough information so that she will help him. And that's what he does with these lies throughout this entire series of books, all 12 books. And there I have these various points that he emphasizes. He's from Crete, he's a rich man, he has sons. Sons are always important, remember, because it's up to the son to avenge the father if something happens. So the more sons you have, the better off you are, and people will leave you alone. And he goes on that way. So that's what we do mostly, what this book is about. In the following book, at 14, he finally goes to the farm of his swineherd. He has various shepherds. He has various farms. Odysseus has farms. One is a pig farm. That's under Eumaeus. There's a cattle farm under somebody else. Philoetius is his name. He has another farm with goats. Melanthius is that shepherd's name. And they take care of these farms. And these are huge farms because you're given the numbers here. We're talking about 600 or so pigs that he's taking care of. And here we find out what's happening in Ithaca, because he says that the fattened pigs always have to go daily to the suitors in Ithaca who demand pigs to eat while they're courting Penelope. And we find out about Eumaeus here. It's all about Eumaeus, the swineherd. We meet him at his hut in the first third of the book. Then there's an elaborate lie to Eumaeus, which takes up 50% of this book, the second lie. And then there's another lie to Eumaeus, which is actually the third lie, but the second to Eumaeus. And this is interesting because Odysseus, unknown to us, knows Eumaeus. They grew up together. Eumaeus came into the family as a young child. He was bought by Odysseus' father. And when he grew up, he was given the management of the farm. So Odysseus knows him well. And he knows the kind of man he is. So he's going to base his lie on what he knows about Eumaeus. However, the readers, you don't know that. But when Eumaeus tells his lie, excuse me, everything comes together then, because then you know why Odysseus used the lie he is using, because you realize when Eumaeus is talking that Odysseus is basing his remarks on what he knows about Eumaeus. It seems that Eumaeus, as a child, and every slave is from an aristocratic family. There are no peasants in Homer. Everybody is from a very good family. Eumaeus was a king's son who was abducted at a very early age by Phoenician traders and sold. And he happened to be sold in Ithaca to Odysseus' father, who was kind enough to buy the child and raise him as his own. And when he grew up, he gave him the management of the farm. And as we find out as you read the Odyssey, that these slaves depend everything on their masters. One of the things that Eumaeus tells us in this book is, I wish Odysseus was home so he could give me a wife, so I could have a family. Since my master isn't home, I don't have a family, I don't have a wife. So they depend on everything on their masters, their whole life. And this is what you get in 14. And there's the other lie. First you have the meeting of the two, and we find out how frugal Eumaeus is. Even though he is management of the farm, he eats only from the fattened pigs, always go to the suitors. He has the leftovers. He makes his own clothing, his own shoes. He's interested in doing the right thing for Odysseus. He's the good guy. Later on, you're going to meet the bad managers, like Melanthius, who is in charge of the goats. But this is the good guy. And so his first lie, you notice, Odysseus' first lie to Eumaeus is still the same as the first one I just mentioned. He comes from Crete. This time, he's the son of a rich man called Castor, who happens to be king in Crete. But he's illegitimate, he tells us. Now that's important because later on you're going to find out something about Eumaeus that fits that particular thing. Eumaeus is also very religious throughout, and he thinks that no matter who the person is, whether good or bad, if you do the wrong thing, the gods will eventually punish you. And so Odysseus knows this and bases his lie on that fact. He again is a man from Troy who fought in Troy. Idomeneus is his equal. Remember, Idomeneus is the king of Crete. So again, he's an equal of the king, the man he pretends to be. He fought in Troy, and then when he returned home, he didn't stay very long. He decided, because he was an adventurer, he didn't want to stay in Ithaca, so he started out for Egypt after the Troy expedition. And he spent 7 years in Egypt. Now, from that point on, much of what happens is a repetition of his own adventures hidden under different names. So in Egypt, he meets another king. In Egypt, his men rebel, just like his men rebelled when they left from Troy. If you remember back in his adventures, his first adventure was at a place called Kostas, where the men started drinking and eating and abusing the people, and they took women and children. And when Odysseus tried to tell them to move on, they wouldn't. And it gave the opportunity of the other Kikonians to attack him and killed 72 men of Odysseus by not listening to him. So he repeats that here under disguise. In Egypt, his men started killing, taking women and children. He couldn't control them, and they were defeated. This time, everybody was either killed or enslaved, including Odysseus himself. So now Odysseus is enslaved by the king. However, he goes in front of the Egyptian king, kneels before him, repents, says his sorry, gives himself up completely, believes that he's done wrong and he should be punished. He's saying all this because he knows the kind of man Eumaeus is. And that's what he would like to hear. That if you do wrong, you repent. That you ask forgiveness. So Odysseus, in disguise, says he asks forgiveness. The king forgives him. He stays in the king's presence for a whole year until Phoenicians get to him, tell him that they can take him home, and they abduct him while going home. Now the Phoenicians are bad guys. In the first lie, they were good guys. Now they're the bad guys. So they take him to a place, well, first of all, while they're going to Phoenicia, they have a shipwreck. Remember, Odysseus had shipwrecks in his adventures, and he loses everybody except he survives, and he floats on a raft. You saw that this happened during the adventures. So on a storm, he gets in a storm, he's saved on a raft, and he ends up in a place called Thesprotia, where another king, King Phaedon, gets him. Now that story is exactly like the story when he lands in Achaia, because this king's son finds him, takes him to his father, they welcome him. In the original story, the girl Nausicaa finds him, takes him to her father, and they save him. That's what happens. Then that king, who's the good guy, is ready to send him home to another king in another town again. But on the way, he is enslaved again. He is sold. He is taken again by Phoenicians. And they stop, those Phoenicians stop at a place called Ithaca, which they pretend nobody knows now, and they left him off there, and that's why he's in his present condition. They left him destitute. So he tells Eumaeus, here I am, this is how I got here. I'm in rags. They took everything I had. They haven't. He stored everything in the cave, all his wealth. But he's lying again. And he's telling the story in such a way to show that he is the kind of man that Eumaeus should admire. Because in telling his story, he's staying very close to what happens to Eumaeus when he tells his story later on, as you find out in the following book, in 15. Because Eumaeus too is taken as a child, is enslaved, is sold into slavery. Everything that Odysseus says happens to him happened to Eumaeus. And that's why he bases his story. So in telling these lies, he's showing the use of mind. We say lies right now, but that word does not come into Odysseus' vocabulary. A lie is merely being clever. Lies don't become lies till later on, where you live with other people in cities. In this particular case, you're just, instead of using force, via, you're using metis. You're using your mind to get by. Using them for positive reasons. And that's what he's doing in telling these lies here. And then after this happens, there's a great deal of conversation between Odysseus and Eumaeus. We find out how things are faring at the farm, what's going on in Ithaca, what's happening with the suitors, what's happening to the wife. He gets all the information he needs because he's also plotting. How is he going to take care of the suitors eventually? there are 108 suitors asking for the hand of his wife. And along with 108 suitors, they also have 10 servants with them, plus a singer, etc. So they have, actually, there's a lot of people. And the question is, can one man, even if he get his son to help him, fight 108 warriors? Because all of these men are princes, they're fighters, and they're asking for Penelope. So he's trying to find a way. How is he going to plot? And there's a lot of controversy now from these books on, because the main question becomes, how is he going to fight the suitors? And is there recognition between the people that might help him? Do they really know who this beggar is? Or does he remain a beggar, unknown to everybody, till the very end of the Odyssey? Up to maybe the 60s or the 70s, it was always believed by the scholars that no one recognizes Odysseus. He is a beggar. But all these new theories in literature, and the way you look at language and the way you look at the words closely, now indicate that there's recognition as early as book 13. That the things he says are in many cases signals to those he loves the most and knows the closest, like Eumaeus. So at what point, we might say, does Eumaeus begin to see that this beggar in front of him is actually not a beggar and could be Odysseus? And there are all kinds of signals if you look at the words closely. For example, things like at the very beginning, Eumaeus tells Odysseus that he can't serve him too much because he doesn't have anything to serve. The fat pigs, as I said, the best ones, have to go to the suitors. He's ordered to do that. So what's left for him and his shepherds, Eumaeus also has shepherds. Eumaeus has made enough money that he himself can buy slaves, which are also aristocrats at some point. So he's working the farm with 4 other shepherds under him, and they eat the leftovers. And they're happy to share with Odysseus those leftovers. But after these lies and these stories, Eumaeus kills the fattest pig around to serve him. And not only does he serve him the fattest pig, but he gives him the best portion. Now, why should he give the beggar that he just met, a stranger, this portion, and why at this particular point? Those questions keep coming up. Does he realize something? And the questions he asks, the things he says about his master, like, oh, Odysseus will never return again, says Eumaeus. He's long gone now. Is he fishing for more information in saying those things? And if you read closely again, you see certain things coming out. And this becomes more obvious as you get towards the end, especially book 19, where he gives his final lie, or next to the final lie, to his wife, who he appears before as a beggar and tries to tell her again a story of how he came here, who he is, etc. But there it's more obvious that he's feeding her signals. And at one point, towards the end of the Odyssey, when the son Telemachus says to Penelope, why don't you go and greet your husband, now that you know it's Odysseus, when he finally reveals himself and he kills all the suitors, and he says, I am Odysseus. And Penelope is standoffish. And the son says, you haven't seen your husband for 20 years. Why don't you greet him? And the father says, leave her alone. We have secret signs between us. Let her make sure who I am. So he reveals that he has secret signs, but you don't learn of that till book 23. So what happens in 19? What are the signs there, as you'll see as we go on? So that's what they're talking about here between Eumaeus and Odysseus. They're getting to know each other, and it seems that Eumaeus, by the time this book is over, isn't sure who this man is. And when he goes to Ithaca later on to report to Penelope that Telemachus, who also joins him at the farm in the next book, has arrived, the way he puts the story to her about the stranger is interesting, because he's not just a stranger. He builds him up. He's an unusual man. He knows certain things that nobody else seems to know, which again hints that he might have an idea who he is. So that's what most people do that study the Odyssey and all, are involved with these questions. How can you prove this? And there are papers and more papers on trying to say this. Now the second lie that comes later on, Odysseus, as I said, is a beggar. Athena, who reveals herself to him after he tells her the lie is the shepherd, she turns into a woman before him and says, I am the goddess Athena. And she says to him, I'm going to change you, transform you to a beggar by changing your face and all, wrinkles and everything, and putting on rags, so that nobody will know you, so that you can decide how you're going to take care of the suitors. So she does this. And now he's in the beggar for the rest of the book in this form. And he goes to Eumaeus as a beggar. And he's talking about being cold. He says, I only have these rags on me. And I notice that the weather is cold here. What are we going to do during the night? I need some kind of cloak. And Eumaeus says, I don't have anything but what I'm wearing, but as soon as Telemachus arrives, he should be able to provide you with some clothing. But he still tries to feel Eumaeus out. Odysseus tries to feel him out, see how kind he is, how far he's willing to go in his hospitality. And he keeps mentioning this cloak throughout the book. He's always cold. He's always looking for something. And he tells him the second lie. And the second lie is, he tells him that once, long ago, this beggar met Odysseus. And where did he meet him? He met him in Troy, which again shows that the beggar must have been somebody. He was in Troy. And not only somebody, but he says, we were a threesome. Menelaus, Odysseus, the beggar. Well, that makes him important too, if he was alone with these three. And they were together in Troy during a battle. And it was night. And the third guy, the beggar, who is actually Odysseus, forgot his cloak. And he's freezing to death. And he turns to Odysseus and says, you know, I'm not going to make it till dawn. It's so cold. And Odysseus says, I'll take care of it. So he stands up and says, I need one of the soldiers to go back to Agamemnon at the main camp and say, we need help here. So one of the men, Thoas is his name, comes up and says, I volunteer. I'll run to the camp. Takes off his cloak so he can run, lays it aside, and runs to Agamemnon. So now the beggar has a coat. Odysseus is clever. Keep in mind, he is Odysseus, but he's saying this about Odysseus. So now Eumaeus, all of a sudden, he has an old coat that he uses when it really gets cold. He says, I'm going to give you this till Telemachus returns and he can provide you with better clothing. So he gets his cloak, again, by using his intelligence, by using his story. But even at that point, you have to question, does Eumaeus realize something with these lies? Does he see something in this beggar that nobody else sees? And after the lie, you get some more conversation between the two, which brings them closer together. So that's what goes on in book 14. 15 is the book in which Telemachus finally returns. We left him off in book 4 in the Odyssey. Since book 4, he's away in Sparta with Menelaus. Finally, in book 15, he's going to return. So the first part of the book talks about his return to Ithaca, and then we see him at Eumaeus' hut, and then we go back to discussing his return. So again, it's balanced in this way. Those are the three main parts of that book. These are the things that go on in this particular book. In the first part, we get Athena, the goddess, who decides after she appears to Odysseus as a shepherd, she says, you go to Eumaeus' hut, and I'm going to go back and take care of your son, and tell him to come also to the hut so we can have the reunion of father and son. So that happens first. And I do this so you can see how Homer balances his story, how he jumps around. He never takes a particular episode and goes through it. He gives you part of it, goes to another one, comes back, goes to another. So he keeps the story moving, which makes it interesting for the reader. And you can see these things going back and forth. 42 lines, you have Athena and Telemachus. Then you jump to Telemachus with his friend who has gone to Menelaus' home in Sparta with him. Pisistratus is the son of Nestor, who drove the chariot that took Telemachus to see these two kings, Nestor and Menelaus. So they're discussing among themselves. It's time to go, Telemachus says. We have to get out of here. We've been here too long. But before they finish, because you see in number 4, they pick up the conversation again. Before they finish their part, Telemachus is meeting Menelaus. It's a new day. Menelaus comes up. He wants to entertain his guests some more. Telemachus has to tell him that he has to leave. He can't really stay around anymore because he knows things are going on in Ithaca with the suitors and his mother, and he's afraid that he's going to lose his inheritance if his mother does decide to select a suitor. That's what these kings have been telling him all along. Don't leave your kingdom unattended. You have to be around. You have to watch for your interests. And it's interesting, in those conversations you find out what position women have in this culture. There's one point, for example, that Athena is saying, and remember, Athena is a woman, and she's the goddess of wisdom. She's saying you can't leave your mother by herself, because women, once they select a man, they forget everything else, and they're more interested in their husbands, they're in their sons. Well, this is something about the culture. It doesn't have to be that way, but that's the way Homer sees it. So you pick up all of this information. That's how you learn something about Greek culture at the time, by listening closely to what these people are saying to each other. So Menelaus wants to keep Telemachus more, to show off his kingdom, to entertain him. Telemachus insists that he has to leave. Finally, he gets together again with his friend, and they say, you know, we have to leave in the morning. This is it. We can't stay anymore. And they leave. Now, on the way back, they're going to leave from Sparta, I showed you in the map, and go to Pylos, where the ship is docked. So they're passing by Nestor's place again, that is the father of Pisistratus. And it's customary and polite that they should stop with Nestor, who will not hear them going to the ship without being entertained. he wants to show off too. Hospitality means being good to Zeus, who is the god of hospitality. But Telemachus says, I don't have time. I have to get back, and I can't be detained any longer. So he tells his friend to go to the father and make excuses, but he's not going to he's going to go around the palace so that he's not seen and go directly to the ship, as he does. But going there, he meets another important character that's going to become important in the following books, and his name is Theoclemenos, number 5, who is a prophet. And he becomes important because whatever a prophet says in the Odyssey comes true. Not only do they prophesize what's going to happen, which is always true, but there are always prophetic signs throughout the Odyssey, especially in these books. And it's usually some eagle flying with something in his talons. Usually an eagle that has grabbed a rabbit, or an eagle that has grabbed something else. And as the eagle flies over our characters, if the eagle drops whatever he's carrying on the right side of the character, that's positive, that's going to happen. If he drops whatever is carrying on the left side, it's not going to happen. And this is always the case. It happens. So you get these signs throughout to let us know, the readers know, that everything is going well. No matter what happens, Odysseus is going to win. Telemachus will win. Because things always happen to their right. And you have Theoclemenos to predict what's going to happen. So that's an important passage. And I'm going to tell you about it in a minute when we go to the next slide. But after that, and you notice how big it is, how long it is there also. After that, number 6, Telemachus is seen with his companions. That is, they're sailing to Ithaca. And you see what they're saying, what they're discussing. And they finally land in Ithaca. But Telemachus knows enough not to go into the city, because he's been warned that the suitors are after him. Now, you have to keep in mind that at the very end of Book 4, I think around line 484 or so, in Book 4, the suitors decide to lay in wait for Telemachus so that when his ship arrives, they can attack it and kill him. He's warned of this. So he has the ship stop before it reaches Ithaca. He gets out to go to Eumaeus' hut, and he tells his companions to take the ship into the port. That's what they discuss there. And then we switch back to the hut. Notice we go from the farm to the hut, from Athena to Menelaus, back and forth to keep the story moving. So we meet Odysseus and Eumaeus now, in which place Eumaeus, in red here, is going to tell his story, which is very similar to the lie that Odysseus had in the previous book. So we can put that together now. Once Eumaeus tells his story, and we know that as a young boy he had a maid, a Phoenician maid, again, bad guy, who took care of him. And she also was enslaved when she was young. She was a princess. Phoenicians took her. They sold her. Eumaeus' father bought her. She became the nanny for Eumaeus. She met a Phoenician finally when she became older that came to that kingdom. She fell in love with this Phoenician. They made love, and the Phoenician told her, you know, I can take you back to your parents who are still alive. They're doing well, and I can take you back. And she says, yes, I would like that. He says, well, wait till we gather our business, and in a year, we're going to signal to you when we're ready, and you can come with us. And she says, okay, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do you a favor too. I'm going to steal whatever I can from my master's house, and he has a young son that I'll bring with me and you can sell it. You'll bring a lot of money. Phoenician says, fine. This happens, the year comes around, they tell her they're ready to leave. They leave, they get in the ship towards Phoenicia, there's a storm, and she drowns. Why does she drown? Because she's bad. Because she's doing all this. Remember, Eumaeus is telling his story. And the gods punish those that do bad. So Artemis, we're told, the goddess of the forest, kills the woman, and they throw her overboard. That takes care of her. Now, the child is still with them. They take him to Ithaca, they sell him. Odysseus' father buys him, and he is Eumaeus, who becomes. So his story is very similar to the story that Odysseus says about himself. So that's the story there. And then, from there, we jump back to number 5, Telemachus and Theoclemenus, where now they're reaching Ithaca, and this Theoclemenus says, where would you like me to go? Theoclemenus says, when he meets Telemachus, he says, I'm an exile. I'm an exile because I killed somebody in my own area, and the relatives are after me. So I cannot return. And that's the way things were done in Homeric times. There's no punishment other than exile. When you kill somebody, it's up to the relatives to make a deal with you. Either they'll receive money for the crime, or they'll receive money plus exile. They say you have to leave this town never to return again. You leave the land. They don't hang him, they don't kill him, they just exile him. And you notice throughout that there are many such exiles that they talk about. So Theoclemenus is one of these people that has killed somebody, had to leave, and is looking for asylum. And he happens to meet Telemachus, and he says, this is what happened. And since this is common, Telemachus says, yes, I will help you. That's hospitality. I'll take you back to Ithaca, and you'll be part of my family. However, his family right now is in shambles. He says, I can't send you to my mother. She never comes out of her room in the second story. There are suitors all over the place. I can send you to some relative, perhaps, who can take care of you till I am free to entertain you myself. And initially, he wants to send him to one of the suitors who is considered the richest and the one that everybody feels Penelope is going to select. But after talking to Theoclemenus, he has second thoughts. He says, that's not very smart of me to do that. He's an enemy after all. So he sends him to one of his companions' home, who is going to take care of him till Telemachus is ready to return and take care of himself. And that's how that particular book ends. But we have to go back now to the Theoclemenus story, because he is a major character and becomes an important character in the Odyssey later on. And Homer gives you this is important. I'm doing this because it shows how Homer uses myth. And he uses myth constantly throughout the Odyssey and the Iliad to make his point. But he only uses the parts of the myth that are important to what he's trying to say. And it gets confusing for the reader. So we start out, and it also shows you how he digresses. There's a lot of digressions in Homer. He's giving you the narrative, and all of a sudden he digresses to give you the story of something else. And that something else is usually a person or an object that is going to be important in a later book. For example, the bow is going to kill the suitors. So at some point we have to have the story of the bow. Where did it come from? What is it like? That's a digression. Theoclemenus is going to be an important prophet later on in the book, so we have to know about him. Where did he come from? Who is he? How did he get here? That's a digression. And you get these digressions throughout. So here, from lines 222 to 286 in book 15, you have a genealogy. Our subject is Theoclemenus, number 15 down here. But look where he starts, where Homer starts. He starts way up here. He says, Theoclemenus is a prophet from Melampus line. Melampus is some distant ancestor. And he's going to give us that. Why he's going to give us Melampus? Because Melampus' story, backstory, is similar to Odysseus' story. And he's merely emphasizing the kind of things Odysseus has gone through. So he starts out to say that Melampus was fleeing Neleus, who is the king of Pylos at the time, for loving his daughter. That's all he gives you. Who is his daughter? Why is he loving his daughter? How is that important? It doesn't say. Neleus forcibly confiscated Melamphios' property for 1 year. Why did he do that? Why did this king confiscate Melamphios' property? You should know that. That's part of the myth. 4. Melamphios was a prisoner and tortured in Phylacus' house. Who is Phylacus? What's he doing in Phylacus' house? Why is he being tortured or being held in Phylacus' house? So all the in-between that comes in between, the myth is eliminated because it's popular enough that the reader should know it. And he doesn't need to explain that. That's not what he's after. Then he says, Melampus, remember he's a prisoner up here, escapes and drives Phylacus' cattle from Phylais, the town is named after the king, Phylacus Phylais, to Pylos, where he's from, completing the labor imposed by Neleus. So evidently, the original king here imposed some kind of a task for Melampus to perform. Melampus goes to perform it. He's put in prison. I guess he's caught performing the task. He's put in prison. And the task seems to be that he's supposed to drive some kind of cattle from that place to the original, to Neleus' place, in order to get the prize, which happens to be the king's daughter. But you're not told all this. Melampus returns Neleus' daughter to his brother's house. I guess the task is performed. Now, where does the brother come in? Why does he take the daughter to his brother's house? And then Melampus eventually is settled in another town called Argos nearby and becomes the king. From that point, from number 8 on, you get the genealogy that will lead to Theoclemenus. And that's interesting too. Look at the genealogy. First, it says Melampus produces 2 sons. The 2 sons are Mantios and Antiphates. So then number 9, he goes to the second son and says Antiphates has a son. And he gives his name. And that son has another son in red, Amphiaraus, who becomes a great prophet. And he's killed in Thebes because his wife was bribed. Another myth that you're supposed to know. Now after that, number 11, he jumps from that second son to the children that the first son has. So why did he give us the second son first? And now he's jumping to the first one. And the first son also has children, and one of those, Mantius is the second son, has 2 sons, and Polyphetes becomes an important prophet. And we're told eventually that it's Polyphemus that produces Theoclemenus. So that's the genealogy. But you notice how he jumps back and forth. He has to go from family to family, and he does this to point out the main prophets that leads to Theoclemenus. It's Melampus, Amphiarios, Polyphemus, and then Theoclemenus that particular line produces. Now, in order to fill in, you would have to know up here at the beginning that Melampus was a man who comes from northern Greece and comes down to his uncle, who happens to be Neleos, the king of Pylos, to live there. And he comes with his brother. He has a brother called Vias. So they come together. Vias, the brother, falls in love with the king's daughter. Her name is Pyrrho. In order to have that daughter, the king demands a task, as always happens in Greek mythology. You have to perform something great to show who you are before you can win the princess. The task that is imposed on Vias is to go to this place and drive this important cattle back to the king, but the cattle is guarded by vicious dogs. Nobody can get near him. Vias can't handle it. So the brother, Melampus, says, I'll take on the task. I'll do it for you. He goes, he's captured, he's put in prison. He doesn't get the cattle, but while he's in prison, he prophesizes that the prison is going to cave in. And luckily they listen to him and they take him out, and surely it does cave in. So they notice that he has prophetic powers. And so the king, who has the cattle, says, look, you seem to be a prophet. My son, Iphicles, another name, happens to be suffering from impotence. Can you cure him? He cures him. Well, after he cures him, the king gives him half of his kingdom. He says, not only that, take the cattle. He takes the cattle, takes it back, and takes it to his brother's house so he can get the woman. That's why it says he went to his brother's house. But also the story says that in the meantime, Melampus has fallen in love with Pyrrho. That's another story that he doesn't take up here. And eventually, a lot of things happen. Eventually, Vias, the brother, and Melampus, his other brother, leave this land and go to Argos. Now Melampus is a prophet. He's known for his deeds, and he is called to this other place because this other king has 3 daughters that are mad, and he wants them cured. And Melampus cures the 3 mad daughters. The oldest one dies. 2 are left, just right, so that each of the brothers can marry one. What about Pyrrho? Well, that's another story. She's there. So they marry the 2 sisters that survive, and they become the king of Argos. That's where we end. And the line begins, and it says there, Melampus produces 2 sons. It's at that point that Melampus finally settles down with a family, has 2 sons. And then we go through the genealogy till we get to Theoclemenus. So we now know that Theoclemenus is from a line of prophets. He's very important. Melampus was well known as a prophet, and so were the other names I haven't read. So he is to believe in what he says, and he's going to make many predictions in the following books about what's going to happen, and everything he says comes true. So that's how Homer operates with his digressions. And they do get a bit complicated because he assumes that you are aware of all these myths. And another thing that makes it difficult is many of these myths have been lost. And not only they have been lost, but also the myths are added to by new writers. So by the time they reach us, there are multiple versions of the same myth and a variety of events that occur, some of which Homer was not aware of because they were added on much later, especially by the Greek tragedians, Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides. They used the myths to talk about the politics of the 5th century BC. And they had to add or create new characters that they add to the myths. So by the time they come to us, they're expanded considerably. There's a man whose name is Robert Graves that collected these myths and put out a double volume, the Greek Myths, volume 1 and 2, where he gives all the versions of these myths. So you look up a particular myth like Oedipus the king, and then you get A, B, C, D, and various versions as they develop through the ages. So that's what happens. That's how that goes. This was the Eumaeus story that I had there, which I went through just to show you the various things that he says. Eumaeus was a son of a king from Syria. He had a Phoenician nanny, as I said. She was abducted, etc., etc. I went through that. But that was his story, which shows us why Odysseus gives us his particular lie. So you notice in these initial books, 13 to 16, you get these lies, and it introduces these new characters, which are going to be very important in the following books. Then you have book 16, which is the book of recognition. This is where the son is going to be reunited with the father. So far, the stories have been paralleling each other. The first 4 books were Telemachus. Then we go to Odysseus. Then he tells his adventures. Now we come to the point where at Eumaeus' hut, the father is going to meet the son, and Athena is going to come into the picture again. And while Eumaeus is away, he's sent off to Ithaca to announce Telemachus' presence to the mother. And while he's away, Athena appears, changes Odysseus to his original form, and has Telemachus see him in that. Telemachus thinks he's a god. How did this man, this beggar, all of a sudden become so young? And there's a recognition scene, which goes on for a while. And once they recognize each other, they begin to strategize. You notice again the parallelism and how these episodes change every so often. At the beginning you have Telemachus being greeted by Eumaeus, which is interesting because the similes that are used in the greeting should be between a father and a son. And here you have the beggar, who is the real father, sitting there listening to a swineherd acting in his place as the father, which is ironic. Then you move from there to Odysseus and Telemachus, where the beggar, Odysseus, is talking to this young prince. And here, the idea is to see how Telemachus has grown. When you meet him at the beginning of the Odyssey, he's very much a young boy that's not ready for the responsibilities that have been thrust upon him. But now all of a sudden, if you listen to what he says and how he says it, he has grown from the experiences he's had. And he's ready to take his part next to his father. So that's what happens in number 2 there. And then we get rid of Eumaeus. He's sent to Ithaca to announce Telemachus' presence to the mother, who doesn't know where her son is, or why he went away, or what's happening. She's also hearing rumors that the suitors want to kill him. and she's very upset that she lost her husband and now is about to lose her son. And while she's away, Odysseus has a conversation with Athena, who appears to him and changes him again. And then you have the recognition that I haven't read there. Odysseus and Telemachus recognize each other. So now Telemachus is the first of the family to know that his father has returned. He's not supposed to say anything to anybody. And again, we can question at that point, how much does Eumaeus know so far about Odysseus? Then from that scene, we go away from the hut and we jump to Telemachus' companions, who are just now coming with their ship into Ithaca, into the port, minus Telemachus, who has already gotten out and gone to the farm. And it's called an interlude because it picks up where we left off in Book 4, line 847. We're picking up the story from that point with number 6. And then we go to the palace to see Penelope for the first time and her reaction to the suitors who are still there mingling around, eating her out of house and home. She's now heard that her son has returned. She also has heard that they're plotting to kill him. The suitors are plotting to kill him. And Eumaeus, who brings the news to her, returns back. So you started with Eumaeus up there, and you end again with Eumaeus. He goes right back to the farm. And from then on, now the next step that's to be taken in the next 4 books is Odysseus is supposed to go to the palace as a beggar to fill out the place. What maids are with him? What maids are supporting the suitors? Which maids have become faithful? What about the other workers, the other farmers, like the goat herd and the cattle herd? Where do they stand? Who can he rely on? How is he going to manage to get his house back in order? That's the subject of the other 4 books, and I guess I end there. Yep, that's it. David.
I know you've been doing this for years and years, but how do you keep it all straight? How do you, I mean, it's unbelievable.
I guess if you do it long enough, I don't think it's any great feat. It's just after 50 years, you tend to. Yeah. I think I counted once, I used to keep a list of the courses in which I taught the Odyssey and the Iliad. I think it came out to 114. So. Anything else?
Amazing.
Yes.
When did you realize this was going to be your passion? At what age?
Oh, 6. Yeah. These are the stories I used to read. So when I went to college, it seems the easiest thing to start out when you need to declare a language, Greek, since I knew modern Greek, that I'd like to take classical Greek. There's a lot of similarities. So it started that way. Yes.
The illustrations that we're using from the book, it was a children's
Yeah,
book.
it's a children's book.
Some of them look kind of scary.
Yeah, I thought
I
so
mean,
too.
is anything, throughout the book, is it like that?
It is, and she uses, it's a large format book, and she does the drawings through the 2 pages, and the words are in between. So they kind of spread over the whole thing.
The faces were very...
Yeah, they're big eyes, and kind of ghost-like fingers. Okay.